Find yourself.
Good, thanks. Ready to
Oh,
teach us?
yeah, boy, yeah, boy. I see we're streaming via live on YouTube. I presume it's only to the select people who have paid.
Yeah, yeah, do that.
Okay, it's quite clever. How do
Yes.
you do that?
It's built in through Zoom.
Okay.
It's got an API somehow, I think. Then it just it's I find it's a more easy and accessible way for
Mm,
everyone to catch up.
exactly.
Yeah,
Okay, so everyone's
perfect.
got their file. I just want to make sure I've got my file here. Going to put it here. So you'll introduce me and then we'll go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we might just start promptly and let everyone catch up with recordings because
Yes,
it's a
I've got 2 minutes.
That's fine. So I'm going to
shorter
just
one.
go. Yeah, I'm going to do stop my video and then I'm going to mute and then you just tell me when to go.
Okay,
Perfect.
we'll introduce you promptly at one. Just welcome everyone. We're just waiting for another few minutes. We will start promptly at one. Adrian has joined us already, and others are joining us as we speak. So just give us another 1 or 2 minutes, and then we'll be on the way. So it's 1 o'clock. Welcome everyone. We're privileged today to have with us Adrian Myrick, the man who eats, sleeps, dreams Excel, and actually needs no introduction. I'm sure you're in for a fascinating hour. And so, Adrian, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Great stuff. Thanks, Stan. Thanks, Danny. I think I'm going to just go straight away into just presenting my screen, and then there'll be a bit of an introduction,
Sure.
and then we'll take it from there. Just Stan, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So I'll introduce myself again shortly. What I'd like to do is I can see my other screen. So if people put their hands up, I'm hopefully going to see it. But please, if you've got questions, just ask. And Stan, Danny, whoever, just interrupt me if there's a question that I haven't seen, just so we can address it as and when.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so thanks everyone for joining us. Hopefully you've all received the Excel file, which is basically what we're going to use to work through a function which is very popular. Everyone claims to know it, being the VLOOKUP function. There's a standard VLOOKUP function, and then we're also going to cover some of the lesser known aspects of VLOOKUP, but we are going to take it from the beginning, which is as if you know nothing about VLOOKUP. Just this file you've been given, you'll see sort of on the front, there's an instruction sheet. This is the standard file that people would get if they do our intermediate to advanced class. And what you'll see is we've given you some links to it if you want to go to it. We're pretty much going to work left to right here on the yellow sheets, but just to show you, this is coming out of the course. So in the intermediate course, that's what we're covering, and in the advanced course, that's what we're covering. So just to show you the areas we're covering. Okay, so I think I'm going to then just go straight into VLOOKUP. Before I do, are there any particular questions about VLOOKUP? Has anyone got a particular problem, which we'll hopefully address? But if you can tell me now, to be quite useful. I mean, either text or I don't know if they are allowed to talk directly.
I would have to give them permission to talk if they need it, but normally people just use the chat box or the Q&A box.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm just opening the various boxes up. So Q&A. Okay, so if anyone's got any questions, just include them there. I'm going to go ahead. The way this is going to work is you're going to see, we're going to go through it from left to right. I'm going to explain VLOOKUP. We're then going to go through one aspect of VLOOKUP. We then do have exercises. Now, the exercise is a bit hard to do it in this forum. So I'm actually going to do them for you. You can follow along, but it's not like you're going to go away for 5 minutes and try and do it and come back. A lot of this material is available on the website. So once we've done this, you just send us an email and we can point you to the correct place where you can see these videos again. I think this recording will be made available to you again, so you'll be able to actually use it. Okay, so I'm going to then proceed if there's no particular questions. Stan, Danny, is the screen big enough?
Yeah, it looks fine.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so firstly, what is VLOOKUP? So VLOOKUP in its simplest form is the ability to look down a list, find what you're looking for, and then to go to the right and get some sort of an answer. So hopefully there's a lot of Manchester United fans out there at the moment. So years ago, we had quite a bad time. It's not much better at the moment, but thank goodness for the weekend. So if I asked you to please look up and tell me how many points did Manchester United score in that season, the process your eyes would follow is that look down this list, find Manchester United, and then go across and find the points. That's basically a VLOOKUP. So VLOOKUP stands for vertical lookup, and that's exactly what it's doing. And everything we need to do to find that answer, we are inevitably going to have to tell Excel. So we're going to have to tell Excel we're looking for Manchester United. We're then going to have to tell it that this is where it must try and find it. And once it's found it, it needs to be told, well, which number must I bring back? Should I bring back that number or that number, etc.? So that at its very basic level is what a VLOOKUP does. To understand how it works, we're going to go for a much simpler example. So what you can see here is we've got a very simple example. I've got a student number. I want Excel to look up that student number over here, find it, and then tell me what the result is. So in exactly the same way as the previous example, you have to give it those 3 instructions, and there's just a 4th one, and that's the one that causes most of the confusion with VLOOKUP. So I'm actually going to just build it. So I'm going to use the function wizard. You don't have to use the function wizard. You can just type it, but I quite like to see it. Danny, Stan, is this big enough? You guys can see what it's saying here.
It's for me, I can read it. I don't know anyone else, but I can read it.
Okay, if anyone's having problems, I mean, there are, you'll be able to watch the video clips a bit later. Okay, so VLOOKUP asks for 4 items. 3 of them is what I've already explained. The 4th one is a very important aspect. So you'll see what it's saying is, tell me what the lookup value is. Then tell me where I must go look for this. And then what column must I bring back? So for example, the first thing is, what must I look up? So in this case, I know it's this student, A111. So I could type it in here, but I don't want to. I want to tell it, please look at that cell over there. Now, what's very important here is the table array. So the table array then is, tell me in Excel, where must I go look? Naturally, when you're looking here, your brain automatically jumps to here and it knows that that's where it must look. But as far as Excel is concerned, there's 16,000 columns, 1 million rows. This data could be anywhere. You have to specify where it must look. And there's 2 very important things to remember about this. Firstly, you must highlight the first column of what you highlight must be where that student number is in this case. So that's critical, and you're going to see why a bit later. And then secondly, you must include anything you may want to bring back. So I've highlighted starting here. The reason I start here is because the student number is over here. And then I've highlighted all three because I know at some stage I may want the result and some stage the symbol. As a rule, these should generally have dollar signs on them. For anyone who doesn't know, dollar signs anchors where Excel looks. So no matter where I copy this formula now, it will always look here. And it's very rare that a VLOOKUP has a moving table. Normally you just point at a table and that's where you're always going to look. So you've told Excel, I'm looking for this. You've told it where to look. Now Excel already can see that that's going to be the answer. Now it needs to know what column index number must it bring through. So what it's saying is, you've given me a table with 3 columns, 1, 2, 3. Which one would you like to see? Now in this case, I can see I want the result to come through. So it's column 1, 2. So I'm going to put a 2 in there. Now it's very important. This is not linked to ABC. If this table was over here somewhere, I would still count 1, 2, 3. It does not link to the ABC. So those are the 3 standard things. Now, most people who've done VLOOKUP, they're told at the end, just put the word false or put a 0. Now, a lot of people don't understand why they do that. They just do it because they were told to. It is a critical thing to do, firstly. And secondly, understanding what it is doing is very important, especially for the other uses of VLOOKUP. So this range lookup false, you'll see it says is a logical value. So if you want to find the closest match in the first column, then you either put the word true or you leave it blank. If you want to find an exact match, you put false. So that's why most people have been told just put false. Because what we're saying is, I'm looking for student A111. It's not okay if it finds student A100. It must find exactly that student. So most people are told put false or 0. For now, let's leave it at that. Please never leave it blank. Okay, when you leave it blank, you're telling Excel you're welcome to guess. When I say okay, you can see it's brought through 34%. So what Excel has done is it's gone and said, I'm looking for A111. I start over here. It's not that. It's not that. It's not that. It's not that. Oh, there it is. I must now bring back column 2, and it must be an exact match. So at a very simplistic level, that is VLOOKUP. I'm just going to repeat it again, this time doing the symbol, just so you can see again how it works and just to remind you of the various aspects. So again, I'm going to find my VLOOKUP. What am I looking up? I'm looking up that student over there. Where must it look it up? I must include in the first column the lookup value options, and I must highlight all the columns that I may want to bring back. As a default rule, this should be dollar signs, and anyone who doesn't know how I did that, I highlighted it and I pushed the F4 key, and that made these absolute. What column index number am I looking for? So this time it's the symbol. So it's column 1, 2, 3. I'm going to put a 3. And again, even without thinking, you just type false. Okay, you want an exact match. I'm going to say okay. And you'll see it brings through the E. So if now, for example, we're going to do student A120, if I type A120 there, can you see that's changed to 68%? That's changed to a B. So what Excel has done is said, you're looking for 120. I'm looking here. Oh, I found it. You want column 1. That's the answer. You want column 2. That's the answer. Okay. So at a nice simple level, that is VLOOKUP. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this down. So this formula now is doing the exact same thing. Can anyone tell me why is it giving me an NA? What's wrong? someone can just put into the chat. What is wrong? Why has it gone, giving me an error message here? I'm very confident the formula is correct. The dollar signs are correct. Everything I'm confident is correct. Why is it giving me an error message? Okay, thanks, Jerry. That's exactly the correct answer. There is no AE150. But just to show you what can go wrong, the reason it gives me an NA is because it's saying I've looked, I cannot find it, but it's because we put false at the end. So we said you must find an exact match. So in VLOOKUP, sometimes an error message is actually a good answer. It's telling you what you're looking for is not there. So unlike other places where it could be you've made an error in the formula or the setup, here we're saying it actually is not there. But just to emphasize, I'm just going to open this up, how important it is you put a false. If I leave that blank and I say, okay, can you see it gives you an answer? Okay, so that's why you've always been told make it false. Because the moment you leave it blank, it assumes a true or it's allowed to kind of guess. And what Excel is pretty much doing is saying, I'm looking for A150. No, that's too small, too small, too small. Oh, I think I've gone too far. I'm going to go and just tell him that's the answer, the 45%. Okay. So it is critical that you almost by default type false and then think if you actually need it. Okay. So that is very, very important. Okay. So that's an exact match. So I'm going to do a couple of exercises showing you how we can use VLOOKUP exact match. And then a little bit later, I'm going to show you why we'd ever want to use this option, the true option. And then also, if we've got time, the how to do a partial match. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that VLOOKUP doesn't have to find an exact match. You can do a partial match. Before I get on to the examples, any particular questions? I don't see any other chat. Okay, I'm going to then continue. So you'll see I've given a whole bunch of examples here. They're the typical uses for something like VLOOKUP. I'm going to explain what we're trying to achieve. I'm going to show you how I would build it. These things are things that hopefully after this lecture, you will actually try out yourself. So when you open this file, it should have warned you that it should be kept as a read-only, which means that you can open it up, it'll be clean, and you'll be able to do it. Notice as well, there's always a solution next to it. So this shows the solution. And if you just want to know what you're trying to achieve, if you can just send us an email and we'll point you to video clips and text that actually tells you, this is what we're asking you to do. So one of the most common uses for VLOOKUP is this. Now, normally this would be on two different sheets, but can you see I've got an address list? So I've got a file over here, and I've got outstanding bills over here, and they're in all sorts of order. So what I want to be able to do is, for example, look up the student 100-135, and out of this list, find out how much they owe us. So I know I can manually look and say that 100-135, there it is. They owe me 1,518 Rand. But obviously, I don't want to spend the whole day doing that. I want to use a tool to actually find the answer. So this is going to be a VLOOKUP, vertical lookup. Whenever you end up looking at a list and then scrolling down and then finding something and going to the right, inevitably that's a VLOOKUP, vertical lookup. So we're going to go over here. And we're going to build the VLOOKUP. So what's important here is to differentiate between the lookup value and the table array. So the lookup value, I'm saying I want to find that student over there. You now then need to tell Excel where it must go look for it. So I have seen a lot of people have, for example, chosen the lookup value, and then they highlight the exact same block again. That can't be possible. Generally, I'm looking for this. Where must I look for it? I must look for it over here. And notice I highlight the entire area and I put my dollar signs on. Okay. Now I know I want the total bill outstanding. That's total here. So I know it's going to be column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. and I type in a 5. Note I didn't count from A. I didn't say 1, 2, 3, 4, and get up to 10, 11. Whatever I've highlighted, those are the numbers that I end up using. And by default, you always say false. Remember, that should be your default, and then you can think if you need it afterwards. When I say OK, in this case, you'll see it gives an NA. Now, that is a useful message. It is, you'll see I've got the answers here. What that's telling us is that this student is not on this list. So presumably they owe us nothing. If I copy it down there, and I'm just going to copy a few. Can you see it's found student 100,135 owes 1,518, which is down here. That student owes us that much. These students are not on the list, therefore they don't owe us anything. So that's a very common way that VLOOKUP is used. So that's hopefully the one aspect. Now, another way that we'd use it in this example is it's all good and well having my list of student numbers and their addresses and looking it up. But what happens if I've been given a student number on the outstanding bills and they're not actually in this address list? So whereas here we're trying to pull information through and say, how much do they owe us? On this side, we're going to say, well, we're trying to check, do we have an address list for everyone? Because if we're not careful, we'll send out the invoices, but someone here won't get an invoice because they're not on our address list. So in this case, we're actually using VLOOKUP to find out, is everything I've got here in this list? And it's one, again, gets back to that aspect. We actually want to see the error message. An NA means something's missing. So this is not an error as in you've made an error. This is useful information. So in this case, again, we're going to build a VLOOKUP. And now the lookup value is here. Now remember, these would normally be on different sheets. A lot of people make the mistake of kind of trying to do the work for Excel. They start pointing over here. But what we want to know is, in this list, do we have the addresses everywhere? So what is your lookup value? It is that student number. Where must it look for that student number? Remember, there's no point pointing here. It's obviously going to find it. You must point over here. And in this case, you'll notice I'm just going to highlight the first column and just put my dollar signs on. Now, the reason I only have to highlight one column is because in this case, there's nothing really for me to pull back. I literally want to know, are you there or not? You could highlight, I suppose, the 4 columns and bring the address back. But all I care about is something missing here? Don't forget the dollar signs again. So in this case, the column index number, we've only given it 1. So it can only be 1. But let's make the mistake. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I type a 4 and I put false, you'll see it gives me a ref error. So what it's saying is, I don't understand. You've only given me 1 column, but you've asked me for column 4. I don't know what you're looking at. So it's just to be aware of that. If your table is only 1 column wide, then that's the only option you have here. So I'm going to put a 1. And when I say OK, you'll see what Excel's done. I'm looking for this. I went here. I found it. And if we copy it down, notice that all of these are fine. And then you'll see this student here, 100,168, is not in this list. Okay, so hopefully you can see that this bit of information is very useful. It means we need to, before we send these invoices out, find an address and update that person's information. So this is probably the 2 common uses of Excel. One, to pull additional information through. So it could be an address, anything that's coming from a master file, an amount, etc. And the second one then is I'm checking if it's in that list or not. Okay. And just keep in mind that if you had used true here or you'd left it blank, you would have got a false answer. You would have got a wrong answer. It would have just found something and you wouldn't have noticed it. So it is extremely, extremely important that you understand that last aspect, the difference between true and false. Okay. Keep in mind you can do it later, and there are the proper solution is over here. So you can actually see the formula we used. The best way to learn though is to try this for yourself and to get it right for yourself when you have a little bit of time. So any questions on example 1? Okay, so it looks like no questions at the moment. What about example 2 then? So example 2 now uses that ability of VLOOKUP to look at 2 lists and to be able to say what's missing. So this is the equivalent of a recon. So very common use for VLOOKUP. So you'll see here I've got list 1, here I've got list 2, and something happened, and these 2 lists should be exactly the same, but I know they're not. If I come down here, you'll see one shorter than the other. So all I want to know without a major hassle is what is missing from each list. So I suppose technically you could print it out, get your highlighter out and highlight that and then find it over here. And you could do that for the rest of the afternoon, or we can make use of our VLOOKUP. So the first one is quite important, and I do want you to just think about and watch what happens here, because this is the most common error we see on this particular example. So the first part is easy. I'm going to do a VLOOKUP. Now I know I'm looking for the transaction ID, so I'm going to choose that cell there. Now the most common error we see is when people put the table array, they do this. They highlight this block because it's in a nice block. Okay, and they put their dollar signs on. Column index number is, we just want to know whether it's there or not. So I'm going to just put a 1, and the range lookup is going to be false. And when I say okay, it gives me an NA, but I can see it. There's that one. There's that one. Can anyone tell me what have I done wrong in this setup? Any thoughts? Okay, so what a lot of people don't notice is because this is such a nice block, they automatically highlight the whole block. But the way this thing works, and what they often do is they then put a 2 over here. Because in their minds, they're thinking, I've given you the block, please look for this in column 2. But that's not how VLOOKUP works. VLOOKUP says, the first column you give me, you've given me column K. That's where I expect to find that item. Okay, perfect. The Martine, I think that's the correct answer. But it's so easy to just highlight the block and put the column number as, and you think you're telling Excel where it must look, but you're actually telling Excel where to pull it back. So actually the table array here is very important. The first column must be the one that matches what I'm looking at. And in this case, I'll highlight these 4 columns, but it's not really critical in this case. Can I put my dollar signs on? It is column 1 and it is false. So very important. Column 1 is where it looks. You cannot tell it to look at a different column. What you can tell it is what column to bring back. So that's very important. So when I say okay, I can copy this down, and you'll see now each of these is going, looking at the transaction ID, coming here and finding it. And if we go down here, can you see over here, we've got a whole bunch of transaction IDs that are not in this list over here. So this 100, 130, if you look through here, you won't find it. Okay, so that immediately is useful information. We now know that if we're going to use list 1, we just better be careful here because these are the ones that are missing. Now, when something like this happens, you need to do the recon from the other side as well. This is going here and saying, are you over here? But obviously the same issue can exist the other way. We might have things over here that are not over here. So again, it's a VLOOKUP. What am I looking up? Please look for that transaction ID. Where must it look it up? You can highlight that there and put your dollar signs on. Column index number, I just want to see column 1. And range lookup, remember, always you just type false. So again, it's gone, looked for that, found it over here. That's why it gives me the list. If I copy it down, you'll see this transaction ID is missing here. And there's another one here and here. So hopefully you can see that this is much quicker than you printing it out, sorting it, printing it, using your highlighter, trying to work it out. So VLOOKUP is extremely, extremely useful for that type of stuff, for reconning two lists. Okay, everyone happy with that? Okay, I think Danny's answered that question. Okay, great. Now, a third example I want to show you with the exact match, and it's where VLOOKUP can also be pretty useful. So what we've got here is our cash book. So we've pulled this from Sage or from one of those systems, and we need to create some sort of a report, a chart, etc. So we want to get the opening bank balance, the total receipts, total payments, net cash movement, journal entries, and total closing bank balance. So I suppose I could go like this, equals, and physically click on the correct cells. The problem with this is next month, I'll just show you here. Can you see total payments is around 28? Next month, when I get the information, can you see total payments over here is on row 35, which means I now have to go and do all that linking again. I'm just going to actually stay on the A. So we need something, and it's going to be VLOOKUP, where we can say, I don't care where it is, but please pull through the information for the total opening bank balance and the total receipts and the total payments. So please, Excel, go look for the words total payments. When you find it, give me that number, and then give me that number, etc. And the benefit of using VLOOKUP is now every month when you get the data, you just paste it, and it then goes, finds the correct numbers, puts it in here, and then you can see down here we've got some calculations that'll come out. So this VLOOKUP, again, very similar. So it's a VLOOKUP. What we're going to say is, please look for that word over there. Where must it look? I'm going to go and say you must look. And remember, the first column is always where the information is. And I'm going to go all the way to period 7. And you'll see I've gone all the way to the red row, just in case one of the months I paste more numbers in. And I'm going to put my dollar signs on. In this case, I happen to know that we're in column 1, 2. So even though this is period 1, this is column 2. And you'll notice I've put a little 2 up there. And why I do that is going to become important just now. So I'm going to type in column 2. And again, I want an exact match. It mustn't find words similar to that. It must find exactly that word. So I'm going to type false. When I say OK, you'll see it pulls through 458, 190, 458, 190. If I've done my job correctly, I should be able to easily copy it down. So let's look at total payments 514, total payments 514. So you can see I've built a formula that now I copy down, and it immediately goes and finds the relevant information. And can you see my formula immediately starts working? Now, there's a couple of things about this formula that we can actually change, and we should change to make it easier, because at the moment I've done that. If I leave it like this, I can't easily copy it here, here, here. I have to build it again and do it again. So I just want to show you some things to watch out for, especially around dollar signs. So the first thing is this lookup value is looking over here. It's C46. However, if I copy this across and I leave it like this, instead of looking for the words, it's going to look for the number here. So I know that actually, I don't care where I paste this thing, it must always look at column C. That's where the information is. So if you're familiar with dollar signs, I should go in front of the C and put a dollar sign. So what I'm telling Excel is, please, no matter where I copy you, what you're looking for, the words you're looking for are in column C. So that's the first thing, very important. The second problem, if I copy it to here, is we've put a number in here for column index number. We've put a 2, which means that if I copied it to here, and actually I'm going to show you, I'm just going to copy this down. If I copy it to here, can you see it's the exact same numbers? And because Excel has quite rightly said, I'm looking here, I've looked at the table, you told me column 2, that's what I'm going to look for. So we either need to go into this and change it to a 3, and then change it to a 4, then change it to a 5. But this is why I've put these helper cells here. So what we can now do is say, I'm not going to give you a 2. I'm going to tell you to look in that cell over there. Now, because we're going to copy this down, I know that I needed to always look at row 45. So I'm going to put a dollar sign in front of the 45. When I say, okay, copy it. So this formula now is correctly saying, so I'm looking at this one here, please go find total payments, look for it over here, and use whatever column you see typed in here. So this is column 3, it's total payments. So there's total payments, column 1, column 2, column 3. So you can see, if you just think about your formulas, I should now be able to go copy this across, and you'll see it has gone, picked up the correct wording, code, whatever you're looking for, and the correct column, and pulled it through. So just if you think a little bit about your dollar signs, and you do something like this with some sort of a helper cell, you can easily build these things. And the other benefit of the helper cell is maybe this goes period 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but you actually need this to go backwards. Keep in mind, if I change that to an 8, okay, sorry, I need to copy this formula. I didn't do that. Let me go back to 2. That's 2. It's pulling this information. If, however, I put an 8 here, now suddenly it's pulling this information. So your report now is extremely flexible. You can go in any order you want. The other benefit of this is now that this month is finished, next month appears, I copy it. I go to this month, which has got slightly different items, but it's structured the same, and I paste, and you'll see total payments 28,840, total payments 28,40, even though it's not on the same row. So this just allows you to be a lot more flexible with your reports, and you're not spending tons of time trying to work out, is there a new account, is something new appeared, and I now have to change my formulas. Everyone happy with that? Any questions? Okay. This one is going to be a simple question. It's just to avoid a problem. Can you see this example 4? There's student A111. I can see student A111. I know the answer should be 34%. And you could look at this formula. It's looking at that cell. The table is that area there. Column is 1, 2. And the range lookup is false. Why am I still getting an error message? Okay. Anyone got an idea? A very common thing. Before you worry about whether your formula is wrong or you've made a mistake, what's one of the first things you should look for when doing a VLOOKUP? You can actually, if you look closely here, if it's big enough, you can actually see what the problem is. Anyone got an idea? Okay, this is a much more obscure one. if you look closely, I don't know if you can see it. Can you see what's at the end here? I'm just going to say cancel. If I click on this cell and I come here and I go a little bit to the right, can you see there's a space there? Okay, so I don't know if you can see it. There's a space at the end. And if I click on this one, there is no space there. So VLOOKUP is susceptible to spaces. As far as Excel is concerned, A111 space is not the same thing as A111. So you must be very careful. When you get an NA, sometimes just look for trailing spaces, because systems often put a space at the end of here, or someone has gone and typed it in and put a space. Just to show you, if I correct it, I delete it, then suddenly it works. Okay, so if you're sure your VLOOKUP's correct, you're looking at this cell, it looks exactly like that cell as far as you're concerned, just have a look at the space at the end. Okay, it's a very common reason why people spend the whole weekend trying to figure out what's going on, and it's actually just a space issue. So everyone happy with that? And effectively, that is VLOOKUP exact match. Okay, so this is where you tell Excel false. So most common use of VLOOKUP, we put false at the end. And what we're saying is you must either find it or not find it. There's no in between. What we're now going to go on to is to actually look at what is that true for? Does it have any use? Most people just are told never use true and that's it. But there is an extremely good use for it. And what it can do is it can replace, I don't know how many people are familiar with ifs, but it can replace nested ifs. So if you've ever done something that you've said, if the, let's look at this one here, if the person's result is bigger than 75%, then give them an A. But if it's less than, if it's bigger than 60%, but less than 75%, give them a B. But if it's, and then you go and you keep building this if function, and it's a long, complex formula, very hard to change. So that's what the VLOOKUP true allows. So as you can see here, we've got a whole bunch of students, they're their results. So that's fine. At some point, I'm going to pull through the results, but I want to know what symbol did this person achieve. And notice this doesn't say 75%, it's 75.3%. Now, if I'm going to stick to my VLOOKUP rule of false at the end, then I need to create a table here that contains every possible score someone could get. So I should have a 0, 0.001, 0.002, and have every possible number that can exist, which is clearly a database that's just too big for Excel. So we somehow need to tell Excel, if I give you a number, so let's use the 68%. If I give you 68%, please come here and see where the closest match is. I want you to realize that it's in between here, and you must give me a B. And that's effectively what the true function does. It allows Excel to, let's call it guesstimate where this belongs. What is critical here is notice the way I've set up this table. It is in ascending order. Okay, because what Excel is going to do is it's going to go start at the top, drop down, realize it's gone too far, and step one back. So let's go through the VLOOKUP again. So the first parts are exactly the same. So we're going to say VLOOKUP. What am I looking up? I want to look up this percentage. Where must I look it up? So again, we must highlight where it must look up. That must be the first column. And we must highlight any columns we plan to bring through. And then I'm going to put my dollar signs on. What column number do we want? There's column 1, there's column 2. I know I want column 2. And in this case, please never leave it blank. You must purposely choose true or false. I'm going to write true because as it shows you here, the logical value, to find the closest match in the first column, sorted in ascending order, put the word true or leave it blank. Please never leave it blank. Always put true. So can you see when I put true, it gives me an A. So it knows that 75.3 is an A. If I copy this down, it knows that 68% is a B, because what it's doing is it's saying, I'm looking for 68%. Let me start here. No, I'm bigger than that. I'm bigger than that. I'm bigger than that. I'm bigger than that. Oops, I've gone too far. Must be this one here. It must be a B. So this is extremely useful because you cannot always give it a perfect table. Sometimes you've got all sorts of numbers. There's lots of stuff between, especially when you're looking up numbers, results, things like that, where this number could be almost anything. You could have 10 decimals at the end here. So that is the main difference between the true and false. And just again, to show you the opposite, when I say false here, can you see we get no answers? Because what it's saying is I cannot find 75.3. It's not in this list. So that's why it is extremely, extremely important to purposely decide, do I want a true or do I want a false? And my rule of thumb is you type false and then you think whether you want a true. Okay. So let's just look at some examples. Why would we ever use this? I'm just going to do one or two of them. So here what we've got, can you see we've got a whole bunch of employees, their names, and we've got a rating for them. And you'll see it's all different, 0.6, 0.5, 2.3, etc. And eventually we want to put this on a chart. The problem is this is lots of information. On a chart, it would look like a mess. So what we'd like to do is actually rank it. So anyone who scores between 0 and 2.5, their description over here must say unsatisfactory. 2.5 to 5 is inconsistent, and so it goes on. Because at that stage, I'll then be able to say who are all my exceptional staff, etc. So how do I do it? I go here, I do a VLOOKUP. What am I looking at? The rating. Where must it look for this rating? First column I must highlight and highlight the second column and put my dollar signs on. What column must I bring back? 1, 2. So I put a 2. And should I find an exact match or an approximate match? And as a rule, generally I know I cannot have a table that's got 3.6 and 2.3 and 3.7. And remember, we can have lots of decimals. So I know this is not a complete possibility of everyone that exists. So in this case, and only in this case, will I then type the word true. And when I say okay, you can see 3.6 is inconsistent because it falls in there. And if I copy it, you can see I now can sort it, filter it, etc. on these rankings, or create a useful chart, or count how many staff fit into each band, etc. Okay, so it is extremely useful. The only other way to do this is to build a big nested if, where you're comparing this, and are you bigger than this, less than this, then do this. It's very long-winded, and it can be quite hard to understand and to change when someone adds a new category. So the true is extremely, extremely useful. Anyone got any questions on true? Most people have done false. Very few people have purposely done true. Any questions on the true? Okay, it doesn't look like there's any questions at the moment. Just feel free, you can type in whatever question. I'm just going to explain one or two of these examples. So I'm going to just do this one, and then I want to get on to the partial match, which is very, very new in well, not new, but very few people know about it. So here, same thing. I've got a whole bunch of employees. I just want to know what their age is. Their age is quite simply based on what is the date, when were they born, divide by 365. So even though that's showing this, the actual number will look like this and change every single day. So I just want to be able to categorize them in some way. If you're between 0 and 20 years old, call it less than 20. Otherwise, be between 20 and 30, 30 and 40, etc. So again, very simple, VLOOKUP. I'm looking up the person's age with all those decimals. Where must it look? It must look in this list here. Notice ascending order. I'm going to put my dollar signs on. It's column 1, 2. And because I cannot have every possible age that can exist in here, I know the range lookup is going to be true. When I say OK, you can see the description now matches the age, and I can copy it down. Okay, and you can see very quickly now, I've created this. So true, exceptionally useful. As I mentioned, if you built a nested if someone decided they want another category, maybe here between 50 and 65, in a nested if, you have to think really hard. In a VLOOKUP, quite literally, I'm going to insert a new line there. I'm going to say this is 60. Let's call it between 60 and 65. And can you see over here, these have already changed. They've updated themselves. So it's a much easier way to do these type of things. So extremely useful, but as a rule, you do your VLOOKUP and you always assume it's a false. If it's not a false, you then put a true in, but just be careful because it will find an answer no matter what. You must just now be sure that you've sorted it in ascending order and you're happy that your VLOOKUP is actually correct. Okay, so hopefully that's quite useful. In the example, there are two, 3 actual examples. You'll see there's a whole bunch of them. But the last one I just want to go through is something called a partial match. Okay, and then I'll give some time for questions. Okay, so for this one, so make it a bit bigger. I've left it in here so you can actually see it. For now, I'm just going to remove this and actually build it from scratch. So what you've got here, and in fact, I'm going to go straight to the example because the example is actually probably more relevant to you guys and rather show it to you that way. So can you see here from the HR system, I've got a first name, a surname, and an employee number. I want to put their email address here. The problem is the IT system puts everyone's name like this. So it says a.may. Now here, I've got a May over there, and it's clearly April, May. But the problem is a VLOOKUP is going to struggle here because remember, a VLOOKUP says, what are you looking up? So if I'm looking up the surname Berger, it'll look here and it won't find Berger on its own. So we need somehow to tell the VLOOKUP, listen, does this name contain the word Berger? Okay. So I'm going to build the VLOOKUP, show you it not working, and I'm going to show you how we can use wildcard characters to tell VLOOKUP. You don't have to be exact. You're allowed to do a contains. So the first part is pretty standard. It's a VLOOKUP. What am I looking up? It looks like the surname is mostly here. So I'm going to say, look up that surname. Where must it look it up? Let's look it up in this table here. Remember, you'll see I've highlighted 2 columns, put my dollar signs on. Column index number, I want 1, 2. And I'm going to put a false here. And when I say OK, I get an NA. And the reason I get an NA is because there is no Berger over here. It's never on its own. Okay. So how do we get Excel to say you can ignore what's in front or behind? I just want to know, does Berger appear in here? I'm going to actually do it. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware of wildcard characters. Wildcard characters, it's typically the multiplication sign, the star, or a question mark. A star in find and replace tells Excel that it must ignore, or what you're looking for can contain any number of characters by that star and any character. So this lookup value of Berger, you can see over here, if in front of it I put inverted commas star, inverted commas ampersand, I'm just going to finish it and then I'll explain it. So at the end, I put ampersand, inverted commas, star, inverted commas. Don't know if you can see this, but it's turned burger into star, burger, star. And as a wildcard character, Excel now knows that the star in front means that there may be any number and any type of character before. And the star at the back means there's any character and any number of characters at the end. But somewhere there's the letters B, R, G, E, R next to each other. Okay, so anything before, anything after, but this must be in there. So this is the equivalent of a contains. So when I say okay, can you see it's gone and said, oh, H burger, that's the one I could find. I don't know if it's, so there's H burger there, and therefore it pulled back that email address. So this is a partial match, and when we copy it down, you can see it's gone and it's found us answers. So extremely, extremely powerful. You just have to be careful of one thing. Okay, and the thing you have to be careful of is because it's doing basically a contains, it is possible that there may be two people with, for example, the same surname and a different first name. So when you do this, you have to be a little bit careful. And what we normally do is we build a check-in, because what I've shown you here on VLOOKUP also works on a function called COUNTIF, where you can say, please count how many times you see star, burger, star. What star, burger, star means is count how many times you see a cell that contains burger. And what you expect to see, I'm going to do it quickly. This is not really about COUNTIFs. If you do the intermediate to advanced course, you'll learn about COUNTIF. But basically, quite simply, what we're saying is, look in here, and we want star, ampersand, whatever's there, ampersand, star. And when I say okay, it tells me it only found one match that could match. But when I copy it down, you'll see every now and again, there's a 2. And what that's telling me is that there's more than one person. So here's book, Terence book, but it's pulled through our book. And I think there's a Rhoda book. Okay, so it's good, it works, but just be careful because you're doing approximates, it does have this risk. So those are the 3 ways you can use VLOOKUP. Unbelievably useful function. Some of you may have heard of XLOOKUP, which is now trying to replace VLOOKUP, but VLOOKUP is still a brilliant function, and it can be used in a variety of ways. Most important, you type false and then think whether you want true. True is very useful because it allows you to do in-between type lookups. And partial is for places where you just need a little bit of help. You don't really want to go through and manually do all of these things. So I think we've got 5 minutes to go. I just want to see if there are any questions, in particular with any of this. And then just keep in mind, if you just send us a email, we can just send you the links to this. But keep in mind, everything is here. There's a solution on every page. And on the main page here, you can see how to go and get the full course. Any questions? Stan, you still there?
Yeah, still here. I don't see any questions yet. Let's see.
Okay, don't see any questions.
No, nothing at the moment.
No, it's all just a thank you.
Okay, so everybody now knows everything, and which is very important. And Adrian, as usual, I saw on one of the columns you said effective, what's it, etc., etc. And I think there are no 10s, but you get a 10 because you're exceptional.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Just bear in mind, Adrian is from Audit Excel. If you want to continue with any of the education on this, you're welcome to contact him. He has courses for just about everything in Excel, probably more than what Excel themselves have. And I want to thank everybody for joining. Your certificates of attendance will be on their way this afternoon or tomorrow. And Adrian, as usual, thank you very much. Very illuminating, educational, and absolutely exceptional. So thanks, and thanks everybody for joining this afternoon. Thank you, Danny.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, and we'll see you, everyone else, in a month's time for. I need to actually have a look at the schedule, but I think we got no claw.
Yes, no class.
No claw in a month's time. All right. Keep well, everyone.
Afternoon, have a great afternoon. Back to work.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.